Hi, this is James Gardner, the CineTechGeek, and I'm here with Yves, and he just gave a presentation at the Future of Cinema conference at NAB, and it was on artificial intelligence. It's a pretty hot topic these days, where jobs are going, where creativity is coming from, so I thought I'd get him on to have a quick discussion about that. So one of the big things I took away from that talk just recently is that AI is not really ready for what people think it's going to change this industry into, is it?
Well, we're seeing a lot of progress. There's a lot of research and development. There are some prototype applications that are working in the post-production and motion capture and CGI arenas. I would say, we are really at the very, very beginning of what is going to be a very disruptive process. But there's a lot of things that you hear about being debated that is such as AI being written, AI writing scripts or procedural AI shooting movies and stuff like that, that really isn't ready. So we're really seeing the very, very beginning of it, but we're nowhere near the level that the amount of buzz or debate about it would make you think it is.
I completely agree with that. Being a bit of an IT type guy, and I do coding in my real job.
Mm-hmm.
So let's bounce on those topics. So during the presentation, you went through a number of things where AI is helping a lot today, such as potentially giving ideas, more than making a decision, but giving ideas on camera tracking and other things like that. Can you tell us what are studios and the industry currently trying to use AI for at the moment?
Well, we are working with studios actively to do what we call audience targeting. And audience targeting is how do you take a piece of content that you have, generally it's a script or it's a TV project or a concept, and try to identify audiences for it, like who would resonate the most with this kind of project, this kind of film, this kind of TV show, what kind of emotional tonalities of different characters would be popular in what different audience segments. So we've just started doing this year, so it's very new.
So this is a lot like sentiment analysis and trying to match that up with demographics and other bits and pieces.
It's really trying to parse the attributes of the content,
yes,
and understand how these attributes have traditionally been resonated with different audience segments. So, you take a script, for example, we run it through our application, and we parse it for the emotional tonality of characters, and then we have a database of thousands of scripts, and so you can look at, okay, the characters in your script have similar emotional journey as the characters in these 5 movies, and so who are the fans for these 5 movies, and was this emotional journey really popular with the segments that you're looking for. There's a lot of work that we're doing around looking at, a lot of the scripts today, a lot of projects for young adults, for example, have a certain amount of darkness in the way the story is being told, and so we really can measure that very mathematically. Is like, does your script have enough darkness, neuroticism to be really, really popular in that age range and that segment, for example.
And another interesting question that came from the audience was, if I'm a producer making content today, he said, what do I buy, what do I get to jump into using some of these AI analysis today? And I found it very interesting. Basically, the response was, well, this is so early, the tools are still very raw, and you're actually, if anything, looking at consultants like yourself to actually jump into that market. How do you see that?
Well, a big part of the machine learning process today is still very, very manual, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of hyperparameter tuning and a lot of looking at the data, and it's still very, very manual and very labor intensive. And I think the shift from machine learning and AI really is a shift towards more autonomous systems and autonomous programs and autonomous applications. We're not there yet. And so you do have a lot of applications around natural language processing, script parsing tools, things like that. A lot of companies are out there doing that today and trying to predict box office returns from various attributes of story and script. For AI and machine learning applied to production and post-production, we're still in the tinkering, consulting, prototyping phase. Now we have some very, very powerful prototypes, but there really isn't anything that somebody can download or use today that would really make a big difference in production and post-production. It's all very specialized, very tentative, very expensive work by teams of engineers and AI experts.
And I think this leads us into people watching this, and you're starting to get into the understanding of AI and building models where you have data sets and you specify what points of those data sets are important and what points of the data sets may be on the other end, and then you build models around them, etc. So I want to mention this because and as a way to try and help the people watching to understand is that you can model a particular outcome in a particular time in terms of what's popular with people. But the thing is, people change all the time.
That's right.
So how can you map the outcomes to the changing mindset and the sentiment in the global audience? Is that one of the reasons why you think that AI really is only ever going to be a tool and probably not ever be a creative engine?
Well, that's the $1 trillion questions, right? How do you predict what people are going to care about 6 months, 2 years, 3 years down the road?
That's right.
The thing about these questions is they're complex, but they're not infinitely complex, which means that we're not, this is another way of saying that we're not yet at a point where we can answer them, but we will be at a point where we can answer them in a few years. So my company, for example, is building a zeitgeist engine, right? So we're looking at a whole variety of data sets about pop culture, about politics, about society, and trying to measure trends and try to really understand what's going on, which is the preliminary phase to trying to predict what's going on next. So you have to sort of build a representation of what is going on today, right? And what is hot today, and what is important today, and what is top of mind today. And then once you have that, you can detect patterns over time that can maybe allow you to predict what's going to be really popular tomorrow. But it's a very, very difficult work. I think we're still in the very early stages of that.
Yeah, and finally, on a point I want to dance on here, it gets to the point again about all this, there's a lot of hype about AI doing things and replacing jobs and everything. And if you're listening to how we're talking and what we're talking about, is that AI, from my perspective, it's a tool which will help us. There's lots of doors you go through to get to a destination. Knowing which doors to open and which doors not to open is the big dollar question, which helps you get to a product that's going to make money. It's going to be effective to the people who are watching it. And AI, from my perspective, and how I hope that the way you're talking, is a tool which is going to help us decide which doors are better to open than which doors are not so likely to be a good open to save us time and money. And it's ultimately saying that this is not going to change or threaten our jobs. It's just going to make us more efficient in making content, making more content. Can you just comment on that finally?
Yeah, I think it's all about giving creatives more data, access to more data about the landscape of the possible to make better decisions, better creative decisions.
That's right.
And by the way, we're always assuming that media creatives have a full representation of the domain of possible stories and characters. I'm not so sure. I think there may be a lot more stories and characters that we can write in media products, that we can tell than the stories that we imagine are there. And I think if I can dream an outcome for the application of machine intelligence to the creative process, it is really about, for me, ideally, it would be opening up the landscape of the possible to the kind of stories, the kind of people, the kind of characters, the kind of situations, the kind of things, the kind of objects to talk about, to tell, that nobody has any ideas are possible or out there, right? How do we know that the stories that we've been telling are on a very, very, very small spectrum, and there's just an enormous amount of possibilities out there that we just haven't really connected to, that we haven't really told? That's what I hope.
Well, thank you very much, Yves. And that's James Gardner at NAB 2019. Bye for now.